Hello and welcome everyone. This is Matthew Chase, and I'd like to welcome you to today's session on Anatomy of an Exhibit, the academic library as place of self-instruction. Before I begin, I want to thank the Learning Revolution Conference for providing me the opportunity to present this session. While this session will be focusing on a library exhibit series that I created at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences, I wanted to share my experiences with the project to provide insight and an outline for others to apply and adapt what I have done for my own library, and so they can use it for their own libraries or institutions as well. I think that many have probably thought to do an exhibit of some kind, but perhaps did not have the experience, knowledge, time, or even resources to dedicate to it. I will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. Feel free to add questions and comments in the chat at any time during the presentation, but I'll be happy to address them right after the presentation. To introduce myself further, my name is Matthew Chase. I am the librarian at the San Marcos, California campus of the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences, which is a doctorate granting institution specializing in the allied health sciences, such as physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech language pathology. I have worked in both public and academic libraries for the past 10 years. In addition to having a master's degree in library and information sciences, I have a background in sociology with a master's in sociological practice in particular. As I mentioned, this presentation concerns the design and implementation of a library exhibit series. It had been something I had wanted to pursue since my experience in the past working at the California State University, San Marcos Library. In that regard, I'd like to give a special credit to Melanie Chu, who had previously worked there as the outreach librarian and had created the Context Library Exhibit series there with museum quality expositions. She had been the one to inspire me to create an exhibit program at my own library. The central problem at the start, though, for me is that I had no real experience or knowledge working with exhibits before. Perhaps more importantly, I had a very limited budget to fund the program at the start. I realized I needed to find out the best practices for creating a high-impact, low-cost exhibit program. So like any good librarian, I did my research. I found a good deal of scholarly literature to help inform the design and direction of my program, both in museum studies as well as the library and information sciences. I was able to identify several core themes in the literature. First, library exhibits contribute to the redefining, transforming, and expanding of not only the roles of library spaces, but also the roles of librarians themselves. Exhibits provide yet another opportunity for library space to be embedded with participatory learning experiences, enabling users to discover, share, and contribute knowledge. The overall goal is that the space facilitates the community to connect through a shared learning experience with the exhibit programs. Another way that exhibits are changing the landscape of librarianship is by being works of scholarship. While peer-reviewed or refereed work remains among the most valued forms of scholarship, especially within the context of academic librarianship, exhibits are pushing the boundaries of consensus regarding the creative and scholarly endeavors of librarians. Some libraries are becoming more open to this idea of exhibits qualifying as works of scholarship and research, as exhibits often require a great deal of time, effort, and resources to build an in-depth and accessible contextualization of a given research topic, or just topic in general. Another core theme derived from the literature that I found concerns the best practices of exhibit design and implementation. There are several recommendations to consider when creating high-value, high-quality exhibits. First, the exhibit should demonstrate in-depth research. This research process can be exemplified in the exhibit text, the citations and references used, and the interpretations that are posed and offered for participants to explore. Enduring value of the exhibit is also essential. Creating a digital version of the exhibit is one such way, as many physical displays of exhibit items are often temporary. They can only run so long usually. And digitizing them would be a great way of doing so, of creating a more lasting significance and meaning to the exhibit. The exhibit's digital version could be hosted through the institution's website or its open access digital repository. Other documentation and publications of the exhibit, including text-based and audio-visual materials for special events and instruction sessions, should be preserved when possible. Outreach programming and special events are another key area of recommended exhibit practices. Outreach activities can include campus events or community events, receptions, or other activities, large and small, that foster engagement with the community, especially within the context of the exhibit and its themes and visions. The literature also points to the opportunities for collaboration with faculty or other stakeholders in the community to incorporate the exhibit in their own programs, events, and in particular for faculty, their own instruction and course content. Since library staff are not typically trained in implementing or managing an exhibit, the literature recommends that staff and administration create policies concerning the use and conduct of the exhibit area, compliance with relevant university policies or other institutional policies as appropriate, evaluation of exhibit program proposals, and the marketing of an exhibit. Participating staff should be subsequently trained on the exhibit's theme or topic, management and maintenance of the exhibit, its assessment and the measures used, and installation feasibility. These best practices have been essential to informing and shaping the process of creating my first and subsequent exhibits. As a brief summary, the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences is a higher education institution specializing in graduate degree offerings for physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech-language pathology, as I mentioned before, but it also does offerings for graduate post-professional education in nursing, health administration, and health science and education. The university is composed of 5 campuses across the United States with their own respective libraries. The university library demonstrates a strong student-centered focus with study spaces, robust co-curricular and patron-driven acquisitions, comprehensive online services and collections, and library instruction embedded in the curriculum. Some faculty have reported seeing the university library and its staff as playing a significant role in the research, teaching, and learning of their students. They have consistently asked that this role be expanded as the university grows, particularly in regards to the library space as a learning environment. Qualitative comments that have been collected, made by the faculty, have focused on the topic of enhancing the library space to improve student learning. Other survey data have also shown misconceptions, lack of awareness, or underutilization among faculty and students with regard to library services and resources. So fundamental to all of our programs and marketing efforts, one of our goals has always been raising awareness within our community and fostering a positive learning experience with the library. In response to these goals and data, I sought out a creative and compelling way to increase community engagement with the library as a place for intellectual inquiry, critical thinking, and evidence-based discourse. The goals of the library exhibit series, after reviewing the literature and other best practice materials, I came up with the following goals for my series, is that 1, develop in-depth knowledge of historical, social, and cultural contexts of medicine for the participants. Encourage critical thinking, interpretation, and evaluation of evidence-based information provided by the exhibit. cultivate discourse of the texts and exhibit materials, and then raise awareness and engagement with library services and resources. So in September 2019, after months of research and planning in exhibit design and implementation, with the assistance of my library circulation manager, my efforts manifested in an exhibit titled Theater of the Body, A Renaissance of Human Anatomy. The exhibit pertained to the history of modern anatomy as a legitimate academic area of study. The exhibit materials consisted of 10 poster-sized print reproductions of anatomical illustrations from the European Renaissance. These images were sourced from the public domain, courtesy of the National Library of Medicine. Contextual companions to the anatomical illustration posters that you see here were object labels and information panels, inspired largely by the guidelines established by the J. Paul Getty Museum. Each poster had an accompanying object label that described the work, as well as some of the history of its creator. Drawing from the scholarly literature, I created information panels to reflect on the major themes and issues relating to the history of modern anatomy. Major themes I focused on included the production and dissemination of anatomical information, the challenges and the contradictions involved in medical discourses of the human body, the controversies and ethics of dissection practices, the unseen contributions of anatomists of color, and the technological advancement of illustration over the centuries. During the planning and installation phases, I had to consider a variety of factors. The library space at the San Marcos campus in particular is relatively small, and most of it is dedicated to study use and collections. Rather than to dedicate a singular area for the exhibit, as I saw many exhibiting libraries in the literature have done, I instead utilized the available wall space throughout the library, capitalizing on high foot traffic areas, placing the posters outside of the study rooms or near the computer stations. I wanted to give the exhibit an open accessibility to foster a sense of intellectual curiosity and self-guided discovery. Because as I saw in the literature, sometimes by creating a singular area, some students may not have quite an understanding of if they can access that area or if they need permission and so on. So I just wanted to kind of give it a more open sense. I also needed to consider the perspectives of facility staff to ensure the compliance with safety and other relevant building policies, especially on campus. Other factors included staffing, budget, and marketing. As with the other campus libraries, the San Marcos campus library is staffed with 2 library personnel only, with the circulation manager and myself as the librarian. Given my other priorities in library instruction, acquisitions, and collection management, and faculty research support, as well as various other typical duties day to day, I had to regularly balance my typical workloads so I could prepare and manage the exhibit. The campus library circulation manager was extremely gracious enough to assist me with some of the details, such as the printing of the object labels and information panels. I also did not at this time have a dedicated budget to the exhibit. Fortunately, I did have some funding left over for ordering the poster prints, the frames, and the marketing materials. Marketing became an incredibly important component to the planning process. In addition to regular social media posts on the library's Facebook page throughout the exhibit's run in the trimester, I also created large flyers to post inside each campus building. I created unique marketing materials as well, including bookmarks that use the anatomical illustrations in the style of tarot cards, as you can see with one of the examples pictures there, as well as a limited edition library trading card that I created specifically for the exhibit. Another way I promoted the exhibit was by presenting a research poster about the program during the campus's triennial Research Day event. Given the difficulty of quantitatively assessing an exhibit, as I saw in the literature, I instead opted to collect qualitative data in the form of students, staff, and faculty comments and statements about the exhibit. Responses were positive. They uniformly found the exhibit to be engaging, visually interesting, and prompting discourse about the exhibit's themes and topic. Some of the feedback we received included, as you can see on the slide, I found it engaging and thought-provoking. One of the students said that they had discussed a lot about the topic with their classmates and found it interesting. Many people found the images very cool or visually lovely, I guess, in a way, and also very engaging. And even in the last comment I really love is like, it's crazy to think where we came from and where we are now, which was kind of the point as well, talking about the history of their own discipline and relating back to the significance of how history informs their present practices. While I initially had planned the target audience to be students, I was actually not aware of the reception that I would receive from faculty. After presenting about the program at the Research Day event in particular, I had several of the faculty approach me about the exhibit with excitement, as they were not previously aware of the exhibit existing in the library. Some faculty came with ideas for future exhibits, whereas others mentioned they would be recommending their students to visit the exhibit. One faculty in particular even inquired about potentially featuring the exhibit inside the anatomy lab room once the exhibit had run its course during that trimester. Given the very positive reception from the campus community regarding the exhibit, I sought to expand the program into a full series, with the plan to host a unique exhibit each trimester. Each exhibit would discuss new themes and topics, but they would fundamentally relate back to the underlying context of health sciences, the socio-cultural dimensions of medicine, and critical information literacy. I also acquired a dedicated budget to further expand the scope of the exhibit series. So in January 2020, I installed the next exhibit entitled Cures and Curses, A History of Drug Advertising in America. As the title suggests, the exhibit focused primarily on the historical development and impact of pharmaceutical advertising in the United States. It paid particular attention to the rise and decline of patent medicines, which were proprietary products known at the time for their controversial ingredients and marketing. The exhibit materials composed of 12 poster reproductions of 19th century trade cards that were created to advertise these patent medicines. These images were again sourced from the public domain, courtesy of the National Library of Medicine. And in addition to that, like with the anatomy exhibit from before, I included object labels and information panels discussing the specific history of the creators of these trade cards or the companies involved. And also with the information panels, I discussed different issues with these pharmaceutical advertisements, whether it was to do with the fact that the advertisements themselves omitted certain potentially fatal or at least harmful ingredients such as cocaine, marijuana, alcohol, and other type of drug components in these products, or that they would misinform in terms of how much was actually in there. So yeah, and then also talking about even the advertising imagery in terms of race and gender were also discussed, and other sociocultural dynamics. Again, all drawn from the scholarly literature. In addition to increasing the number of exhibit items on display, with the first exhibit, it was 10 posters. For this one, because I had the newly dedicated budget for it, I increased it to 12. I also made some adjustments to the exhibit program to improve the awareness and the value of the exhibit and the series overall. First, I capitalized on the enthusiasm of the faculty and the marketing. I quickly learned from my mistake of not more focusing on faculty as a potential audience, but also as a word of mouth kind of advertising route about this exhibit for the students. I distributed handouts of the exhibit to their mailboxes with pieces of chocolate to raise awareness and goodwill. A few faculty met with me later on to tour the exhibit, remarking that they would be sending their students as it related back to their own course content, which was really nice to hear. I promoted the exhibit at the new student orientation as well, and during library instruction sessions as a new and unique library service. I also sought to formalize the evaluation of the exhibit. In conjunction with the library's new efforts to standardize the assessment of all of our library programs and events, I now collect the data using the standard events programs survey provided through the ACRL project outcome. Given that the exhibit exists in the physical space of the campus library, I've provided a comment box near the exhibit where visitors can submit a print copy of the survey. While the survey received a low participation count, the quantitative and qualitative data that I was able to collect still have some value in showing visitors' feedback and experiences regarding the exhibit. The survey in particular was formatted with the 4 following statements as well as a couple open-ended questions, but in particularly these 4 questions were framed in a Likert rating scale. 1, I learned something new from this event or program. From my data, I was able to show that 92.8% of those surveyed agreed or strongly agreed with the statement. 2, I feel more confident about using what I just learned. 85.7% agreed or strongly agreed with this. I intend to discuss or share with others what I just learned. 85.8% agreed or strongly agreed. And 4, I am more aware of the library's programs and services. 85.7% agreed or strongly agreed to it. It was really promising, really inspiring to know personally. So qualitative feedback was also very positive. Comments included, as you can see, I love looking up at the walls and taking a refreshing study break to learn about whatever piece is on the wall. Thank you. That they got to get informed about information that would not have been provided otherwise unless they had asked. So it was creating that sense of like self-guided learning experience right there. Others said it was very informative, very visual, and how it talked about the social dynamics of these advertisements as well. Some of the qualitative feedback also included suggestions for future exhibits, ideas for other events and programs, and even asking for more library instruction integration in the courses, which was really nice to hear as well. So despite the minimal budget, staffing, and resources, the data so far has been very encouraging about the successful impact of the program. Given my own previous lack of experience and knowledge with exhibit curation and management, it has certainly been a learning curve in terms of adapting best practices to the space that I have available. Based on the data available, my library exhibits series has been shown to support the 4 stated goals that I mentioned before about having, as most of the participants survey reported that they learned something new from the program, which supports that first goal of developing in-depth knowledge among participants about the historical and sociocultural dimensions of medicine. The majority of survey participants also reported feeling confident to apply what they had just learned, supporting the goal of cultivating critical thinking and evaluation of evidence-based information. In addition, many of the participants indicated an intent to discuss this newfound knowledge with others, reaffirming that goal of fostering discourse and engagement. Finally, participants explained that they were more aware of library services and programs, supporting that goal of raising awareness and engagement with with our community. And overall, it was showing that the library space itself was being enhanced as a creative and instruction-driven place where the community can engage in critical discourse and self-guided discovery of knowledge and the production of it. The library exhibit series has provided a great array of opportunities and directions for the future. As I mentioned before, one of the most surprising developments has been my relationship to the faculty through this program. While I am integrated in several of the courses as a, as a librarian, and I regularly offer research support, faculty have not necessarily been the most involved when it comes to actually visiting or using the physical space of the library itself. Given the positive reception from the faculty, that could change with the opportunity for collaboration in creating new and exciting exhibits. The university has been making efforts to advance the research and scholarship of the faculty. So with the literature showing how exhibits are developing a position within scholarly communications, I do plan on investing in those partnerships with the faculty toward promoting the exhibits as part of the university's strategic goals. I also have plans to further develop the enduring value of the exhibits. As suggested by the literature, I'm currently in the works of establishing a digital exhibit collection within the university's open access institutional repository. Both the Theater of the Body and the Cures and Curses exhibits will be available for not only students, staff, and faculty, but also for public consumption as well. The digitalization process will have several benefits as a result. First, they will become permanently housed and accessible for our online distance learning students, as well as for the other campuses that may not be able to physically display the exhibits for different reasons. Second, other libraries and education entities, like I kind of mentioned, can adapt the exhibits for their own programs and events. Third, the digitized exhibits will add to the value of scholarship and research efforts within the university. Fourth, given the current COVID-19 crisis, the digital exhibits will allow me to continue the series during the upcoming summer and fall trimesters. In addition to the digital exhibits, I also plan to create a traveling exhibit program among the campus libraries to foster a circulating physical collection for their own events, both large and small, depending on what fits best with them. This has been largely inspired by the National Library of Medicine's own traveling exhibits program. This will also enhance the overall value of the exhibits beyond being a campus-specific program, which it is right now, since it's located primarily in the San Marcos campus. Another recommended practice that I will be incorporating into future exhibit installations is an interactive or participatory component. The literature shows many successful libraries that have allowed the students to directly interact with the exhibit or even add to the exhibit materials. Interactive components could be a comment wall for students to write down their thoughts on the topic for others to engage in, or create their own materials to support the exhibit's overall themes. This interactivity will not only promote the production of knowledge and discourse as per the objectives of the exhibit series, but also provide a new source of data to evaluate community engagement with the exhibits and with the library overall. So with these new findings and new directions, the library exhibit series I have found has been a major asset to expanding the library's research developments, as well as its teaching and learning services to students, faculty, staff, the whole community. And I also wanted to provide the references that I used mainly for this presentation. There are plenty more as well. And then, yeah, if there's any questions, or we can begin or have a discussion about any of the about the process, I'm always happy to do so. And yeah, and even if you, even after this session, you can always contact me. My email's right there. But yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Just gonna stop the recording, but I'll still be here, of course.